want to acknowledge the traditional people here of the Kulin Nation, the Wurundjeri people. We're actually sitting on the border of the Wurundjeri and the Bunurong people. Carol mentioned the Kulin Nation, and I always feel when I do talks that I'm actually almost doing a lesson as such. But a lot of people have never seen a map of Aboriginal Australia, haven't realised about the boundaries that are here throughout Aboriginal Australia. So I like to show, just this short map of Victoria around the Melbourne area, and you could probably place yourself into many of those particular parts there. That's 35 tribes here in Victoria, and of course we have over 300 Aboriginal tribes through Aboriginal Australia. Each of these tribes speaking their own language, practising various ceremonies and rituals. Their boundaries were very clear, and I want to talk a little bit more about the things that are important to us when it comes to land. Home for us isn't really about a building or a piece of property. Home is actually what's been given to us by the Creator Spirit. This is my homeland, Lake Mungo, and it's the date where we actually get Aboriginal people have been on this land for at least 40,000 years. As a Muti woman, I'm very proud of Lake Mungo, and I believe there's a few of you that are in this room that have been to Lake Mungo. The rising of Mungo man and Mungo woman gave us all the evidence that we needed as Aboriginal people to say that we are truly the first peoples of this land. So when we talk about home, home isn't a piece of property. Home is what we've been gifted by this fella here, the Creator Spirit. The Creator Spirit had given us a lot of knowledge about land. The Creator Spirit gave us many things, gifted us, Aboriginal people, with many laws of how we look after country, how we look after our home, and how do we have to respect our home as well. But I also want to talk a little bit today, when in the homelessness side, I want to talk to you about a journey between my cousin and myself. And I won't name him because it's going to be on all over the world on that website thing. My cousin and I were very lucky as young Aboriginal children. In the early days, we would hear stories about the great corroborees that used to take place here on our homeland. The land was our food source. The home gave us everything. The land gave us the food to eat, which is, like at the supermarkets we have today. And my cousin and I, we knew what tucker we could eat from the land. Our favourite was the lollies that we used to get off the trees. It's called gum. Very high in vitamin C. And it was the sweetest gum that you could get off the trees from our homeland. We knew about the seeds, but we never practised. We never practised crushing the seeds, turning the seeds into flour, into damper. But we learnt about them. As kids, my cousin and I, we would know about these seeds, when they would be ready to eat, when they wouldn't be ready to eat. And of course we knew what we could get from the land, how to make things. We were great trackers on the land together as kids. Even though I was born here in Melbourne, the Queen Victoria Hospital, lived in the northern suburbs all my life, I'm currently living back on my grandfather's country. Even though I lived here in Melbourne, I knew all these things because my mother would always take me home, take me back to my homeland. And it was there where I was connected with my cousins and all that had been gifted by the Creator Spirit. Herbs were readily available. Everything in our homeland was for a purpose. Everything had its place. It was a purpose. What you could, what you couldn't. And the herbs were sweet and very tasty. And then, of course, we had containers. You know, the land provided many, many great things for us. You know, the trees gave us not only the air to breathe, but gave us what we needed to carry our babies, gave us what we needed to carry the food in our homelands. We were gifted with animals. The Creator Spirit gave us animals. And my cousin and I were great hunters. I must admit, we used to hunt rabbits all the time. And then when we got a little bit older, my cousin and I, we would be privileged to go out, you know, and I hate to use the term, but to knock a kangaroo. And then you'd have kangaroo tail, you know, for soup. My cousin and I learnt all this together. Our homes were made from the trees. We used to make these little things out bush. We call them, I think in the city you'd call them cubby houses. But we used to actually make these things, and they were our homes on our homeland. We knew the rights, the business, the law. Very, very, very strict law around men's and women's business. We were taught these things. And the evidence of men's and women's business is in the land. It's in our homelands. The markings on the trees tells you where law business is. We don't have too many markings on the trees left here in Melbourne, sadly. And of course the women's business. My grandmother in the last few years of her life, she fought for the right of a birthing place in a little town called Balranald. It is known as the Dippo. She fought for the rights for that area where the women would give birth to their babies, where the women would go for initiations, for ceremonies, to have that place preserved. Preserved for the future, preserved for you, preserved for me in our homelands. So the land gave us everything. And my cousin and I, we knew that. We knew because we had the privilege of being able to walk in the homelands with our old people. And of course we knew about the meeting places, the rituals, you know, where the ceremonies took place. Mungo man, Mungo woman, 40,000 years ago, my old people were practicing ceremony. The evidence is in the rising of this woman. There was a ritual 40,000 years ago. That's a long time. And these rituals and ceremonies, all gifted, once again, by the Creator Spirit. And my old people had that knowledge. And of course the fire. You know, the story that was told to my cousin and I about the fire is that when our people first started to cook, when they first started to cook with the fire, the meat tasted different. But not only did the meat taste different, the fire, the knowledge of fire went into my old people. That's when they learnt. They learnt then how to use the fire, how to rejuvenate their homelands for their future generations. You know, we would burn off the land. So the seeds that lay dormant, they got that knowledge when they ate the meat from the fire. And of course fire was used then, an ongoing thing, to have this place a very lush and fertile land. And there's evidence of that in Cookie's diaries from 1788. So these stories and myths and dreamtime stories, my grandmother's lullaby was sung to my cousin and I. Can I say, it was almost the perfect world. A totally perfect world. So what happened? To my cousin? What happened to him? I went on, worked all my life. I've worked since I was 16 years of age. There has not been a day that I have not worked since I was 16. But what happened to my cousin? Domestic violence ruined his home. Alcohol ruined his home. The welfare department tore the home apart. He was placed in many homes. Not loved, but placed in many homes. I hadn't seen my cousin for a very long time. Until one day I was here at St. Francis. I didn't recognise him at first. He was a grown man. But something dark took over his life. He had a friend, a girlfriend. He has 8 children. All of his children are out of home care. The whole 8 of them. His girlfriend is an ice addict. He's trying to kick it on methadone. I said, "Where have you been, cuz?" And he's like this. Every homeless person I know has a beanie or a hoodie. And he had this, something like this in his hand. This was his home. His home had changed. It had changed dramatically for him. This is all he had. He's lived on the streets for 20 years, homeless. I said, "Cuz, how come?" And he said, "I don't know." He said, "I don't know where to start." He would come back sometimes to Barranald, but I'd never catch up with him because he was out doing things that I weren't doing. He said, "Cuz, I live on the street because I get cared for better if I'm homeless." And I looked at him and I said, "How could that be so?" And he said, "Well, I can get food from the soup kitchens, the soup vans that are around town. When you're homeless, there's more chance you might get a bed." He said, "But I haven't had a bed," just what he had in his hand, "for a long time." So I hadn't seen him for quite a while after that time I met him here at St. Francis. And I must say, my cousin used to come to St. Francis to pick whatever pockets he could pick and pinch whatever purse he could pinch. So I gave him 20 and I said, "I'll see you soon, cuz." I ran into him yesterday, 10 years later. "How you going, cuz?" He said, "Oh, well, he told me he's on methadone and he's still homeless." He said, "I had a house in Drummond Street, Carlton. I had a house because I wanted to get my children back. His children don't want to come back. They don't know him. They don't know the mother." He said, "I had a house." He said, "But it became a house for druggies. So I couldn't stay there anymore in that house." So he went back to the streets, to what he knew. My cousin had spent many times in prison too. And I said, "Cuz, but what about the days we had, in our homeland, out bush, doing all those things that we did?" He said, "It was when they took me away is when I changed. When I was removed from my mother and father, removed from my grandmother, my grandfather and my cousins." He said, "That's when it changed for me." He said, "I wasn't loved." He said, "I was just another number." So he ran away and became homeless. So that's my story, and this story that I share with you today, I hate to say it, but it's almost the story of most Aboriginal families here in Victoria. We've all got a cousin just like him. If it's not one, it's two. So for my cousin, there's hope. A month ago, he went back to see his father in hospital in Balranald. He said, I'd been back up there almost 4 times within the last month. And I said, you're travelling okay then, cuz? He said, yeah, I am. He said, I said, why don't you go back home and stay? And you know what he said? I can't. I can't go back home and stay. And I said, why, cuz? He said, because all the services that I need to survive are here. He doesn't know any different. He's been so institutionalised in various prisons, within the systems, he doesn't know any different. And I watched him yesterday when we were at the health service. And he was cleaning up the tables, information tables, like a proud man, a proud Aboriginal man, proud to be at the Aboriginal health service and proud, to keep the place clean. And I looked at him and I said, cuz, you would have made a great dad. He said, I tried. And I said, your home would have been nice and neat and clean. And he said, I tried. Because watching him pack up the pamphlets into a very nice, neat pile, cleaning the food platters of fruit that was put out at the health service, cleaning all that up. He didn't have to, it wasn't his job. There's staff there to do that, but he did that. So there's something inside my cousin that wants him to be different, but he just can't get out of that being different. So homelessness for Aboriginal people isn't just about a building. The homelessness is really about the spirit. What we have, what we had, the changes that happened in this country, have made a dramatic change to Aboriginal people in this land. Somehow we need to take these hoodies off. We need to take these hoodies off so that they can see the world, see not only the world, but see life with different eyes. Bring back the spirit that they have, the connection to their homelands. That, for me, is the answer for homelessness for Aboriginal people, is reconnecting them back to country, back to their families. Walking down memory lane. Remember when we did this? Remember when we picked that? What about that fruit, that gum we used to get off this tree all the time? We can do that as cousins because their homelands up there are untouched. But can you imagine what it's like for Aboriginal people where their homelands have been destroyed? Where the trees are no longer there. Where the ceremonial grounds are no longer there. Where the food source is no longer there. So how do we make a difference? How do we make those Aboriginal people stronger in who they are? Today, I must say, I'd like to also acknowledge the fact that we have an Aboriginal Housing Board started up around the corner here in Fitzroy for homelessness people. We have had some great developments in the Aboriginal community in trying to address the issues of homelessness, the issues of health, the issues of dying lonely in boarding homes, in nursing homes. We have moved on. We have an Aboriginal health service, Aboriginal legal service, housing. We also have, an Aboriginal nursing home. And of course, the Aboriginal Catholic ministry as well. So we do have, and we are trying, but it is just so hard because we can't take many of our people back to their homelands. So I'd like to finish on that if I could, Livia, and I'd be happy for people if they wanted to maybe have a yarn with the person next to you about some of the things that I said, and very happy to take any questions. So thank you.